Welcome to the Business Results Program. This is how you can transform yourself, your team, and your whole company. My name is Pete Winarski. I'm the CEO of Win Enterprises, LLC, and this video is us recording a podcast episode. Podcast Business Results Radio. Look up businessresultsradio.com or go check it out on iTunes or one of the other podcast platforms. And do subscribe and do give a 5-star review. Now, you as a business leader, we get what you're going through. You've got overwhelm and stress and frustration. You have high expectations on your shoulders, some of which you put there yourselves. Why can I say this? Because we, our team, we've experienced this ourselves. We have been business leaders. We know what it's like. And boy, how cool is it that you have this resource. You can listen to this podcast, gain some insights about what you can do differently, gain some ideas, some strategies that you can put in place right away to make your life easier. That's what we're after here. We want your life to be easier because being a business leader does not have to be this challenging, doesn't have to be this hard. And we want you to exceed your expectations, excel, and achieve the results you want, get your team to thrive, and your company to just absolutely go right through the roof. And you can do that here. Enjoy this episode. Hey, Pete again, real quick. This is a special part of our Business Results Radio podcast. I'm part of a panel for leadership skills and development at this workshop as part of the FABTECH Expo. And I want to introduce you to each of the other speakers and do some teaser content for you. So whether you can make the FABTECH Expo in person or not, you'll get an opportunity here to get to know some of these people and their content. High power, get to know you in terms of leadership skills and development. FABTECHExpo.com if you're interested in learning more. It's the education program on that site. And listen away here at Business Results Radio and Business Results TV. Hey, Pete Winarski here, and I am here today with Joe Mazzeo, and we are talking as two of the facilitators and presenters as part of this FABTECH Leadership Conference on Tuesday the 12th. We're really excited to be here. Joe, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and Pete, I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. Now, Joe, you've been traveling the world lately. Have you been anywhere interesting?
I have. My work brings me to a lot of interesting places, and last several months, I've been to India and just recently returned from Italy, but that was more of a family vacation rather than being work-related.
Well, fantastic. That's one of the benefits where you get all those air miles from flying to India. You get to go to Italy.
That's true. Very true.
There
Yes.
you go. So, Joe, we're part of the same platform, and you know we're in this leadership development and skills development opportunity to really download our brains to the audience. So a little bit what today is for you listening, this is a teaser for what Joe will be talking about. And before we get into that, I just want you to get to know Joe a little bit. So Joe, why don't you just give us the quick skinny, who you are, what your background is, and what brings you to be a known leadership expert.
Okay, appreciate the opportunity. So my career spans 34 years in the automotive industry, of which was spent with General Motors, about 21 of those years in leadership and then senior leadership positions, working in manufacturing, product engineering, quality, and even product development. And during my time at GM, I had a multitude of roles and responsibilities, including working in powertrain, stamping operations, as well as vehicle assembly, and also had 2 global assignments, which I thoroughly enjoyed. Mm-hmm. So that's the background from the automotive standpoint. And then in 2013, I chose to retire from GM and decided to start my own business and created the company called Integrated Lean and Quality Solutions. And that's what I've been doing for the last 6 years, working with
fantastic.
A variety of companies in several different industries. And typically I try to focus on small to mid-sized companies because you find, as probably you know, Pete, that a lot of them don't have the wherewithal, resources, or the knowledge of many times knowing what to do. And you asked the question about the leadership expertise. I don't know that I would say I'm a complete expert in leadership, because there's so many people out there that probably do it better than me. But how I actually morphed into the leadership portion was as a result of the business. And what I mean by that is that when I first started out, the focus was going to be on lean manufacturing and on modern quality management principles. But what you quickly learn in many of these companies is that, yes, there may be technical issues, but I'd say on average anywhere from 30 to 60% of the issues that the companies are facing are not just because they're technical issues, but because of ineffective leadership or not knowing what to do as a leadership organization to drive the organization forward. So that's how that component came into play within my company, where it's been everything from mentoring CEOs to providing training for an organization on what effective leadership is and how you drive that across an organization, even to the point of working with companies and as they try to identify new talent to bring in that fits their respective competencies that they drive within their companies.
Mm-hmm. Well, what's excellent is, just the fact that you've been in leadership roles for 30-ish years or whatever the exact number was that you shared. That gives you experiences across a whole array, and your roles were all over the place too, with manufacturing and engineering and product design, et cetera, right? So you managed a lot of different functions, a lot of different groups that have different demands, and so that puts you in a position where you actually have some perspectives. And I would imagine, let me just guess and see if this is true, do you end up sharing a lot of personal case studies and stories to make your points when you're doing leadership work?
I do, and I try to do them in such a way that it's not always talking about the standpoint of, well, here's what we did at GM, or that the way of GM was right, but more to look at it from the standpoint of what types of things or strategies worked versus which of those did not. And I think many times I spend more time talking about the failures rather than the successes, because I think you actually learn more from the failures than many times you do from the successes. So yes, and I also bring in stories that would not only describe my successes and failures, but also some of my colleagues that collectively we all learned from.
Mm-hmm. Yes, for sure. And it's always nice seeing someone else fail where you don't have to be the the volunteer each time.
True, that's very true. And part of the idea of being a learning leader is the idea that you have to at some times be allowed to fail, not fail catastrophically, but to be able to fail so that you learn from that experience and you carry that forward with you in a meaningful way.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I love the learning concept. And let me just read exactly your title. So learning leaders drive successful organizations is what you'll be talking about during this FABTECH afternoon workshop. So just hit some of the high points. First of all, what do you mean by a learning leader? I think we can kind of surmise it from your example of someone who had a failure and then learned something from it. What are some other things that are important where a leader is a learning leader? What makes a leader a learning leader?
So I think, first of all, it's just the concept that the idea that if you're in a leadership position, you have an obligation, first and foremost to yourself, but probably more importantly to your people, to always be abreast of what is the best way to lead an organization. And this is becoming especially critical now if you think about it, even though this isn't going to be a big part of my talk, but it's becoming especially critical now when you have 4 generations working in the workplace today. Mm. You have people that would be considered those from the millennial generation from about 1980 to people from the greatest generation working in their 70s in an organization. And many of these are could be salary employees, could be hourly operators on the floor, but also can be leadership people. And so when you have a multi-generational workforce that come into work with different perspectives about life and different perspectives about what leadership is because of their cumulative or lack of cumulative backgrounds, it creates a challenge. And so if a leader sticks to his or her old ways of doing business, they will fail without recognizing in today's world, what do you have to do differently to motivate people and to drive people to be successful. And I think the thing that people don't want to talk about is that, people want to talk about leaders in an altruistic way. Oh, he's a great leader because he's a great motivator. But fundamentally, if you really break it down, people in leadership have two roles. Their role is to be an effective leader, but the reason for being an effective leader, very honestly, is to drive results within an organization, because that's why they're there. Whether it's a nonprofit or a profit organization, ultimately leaders are looked upon to deliver the results of whatever the mission and the objectives and goals of a corporation or a company is, or any organization. And part of that means knowing how to drive your organization in a positive way, but also knowing how to hold them accountable, how to remove resources and remove obstacles, but also provide resources for an organization to be successful.
Yeah, that's right on the mark. And in fact, this is where some of our topics actually fit in so nicely together, because while I'm there, my session is about accountability. Some of the other leadership sessions dovetail nicely into that description that you just gave. So this is really, for those of you listening to this clip, if you're able to get there, you'll get a whole cohesive set of leadership principles in this afternoon, not just the one that Joe's talking about here.
Yeah, and Pete, if I could just make the comment. So this will be my 5th year that I've been invited back to speak at FABTECH. And one of the things I always find really amazing is that usually I end up being paired up with the same 1 or 2 people in a leadership type session. And we never talk to each other prior to giving our presentations. And what I really find kind of fun and kind of amazing is that when you listen to and watch each other's presentations, there's usually about a 30 to 50% overlap in the material, which I think is good because it shows the consistency of thought. Or the other way you could think about it is that, we're all either doing the research and applying principles the same way, or we're all totally screwed up, one or the other. And I'd like to think that we do it in a way because we're out there working with people, working with companies, and using a lot of the same principles and coming to a lot of the same independent conclusions. And that's why I think it's one of the cool things is that when you come to one of these sessions, you get to see people like you and me and others that are doing similar work. And so I think it lends credibility to the subject matter and how the topics are being covered.
I think that's exactly right. And I would say I think that's also true because I've been in the programs for a few years and it dropped into some of the leadership ones. And, especially when there's, sometimes it's just me for a period of time, but other times there's 2 of us or 3 of us, whatever. And you're exactly right. They do fit in well together. And some of the points that I might make are also re-emphasized by someone else and vice versa.
Right. So I think that'll be a fun thing.
So without giving it all away, give us a couple key takeaways or key points or something from what it is you'll be talking about on that day.
So the first thing is to try to lay the foundation as to what is the role and responsibility of an effective leader. And I do this at every type of leadership talk to lay the foundation about the things from essentially from setting the mission of an organization to getting the results. And I think that's important because that's the general role of any leader in any organization, of knowing what it is, what your job is fundamentally, and how do you go about achieving the job. Then from there, I talk about, well, what are the opportunities to be a learning leader, whether from a formal standpoint or an informal standpoint. So formal certainly could be anything from did you go to school? Did you get a master's degree? Something of that nature. To the informal, which is also what have you learned on the job, and how are you taking those learnings in terms of transferring them into to things that become part of you as a person and become incorporated into your leadership style that then allows you to be a more effective leader. So the way I would describe it in a way, and it's a way I used to talk about this, about people that were going to be good engineers, because I'm an engineer by education, similar to a doctor. If you're going to be really good, you never stop going to school. Now, school doesn't mean always in the classroom, but it means taking the hands-on experiences that you get whether you want them or not, and then using them in the future to make yourself better, but also then to make your respective organization that works for you to be better, because ultimately your job is really to make your people be successful, and to lead them in a way that allows them to be successful and helps them accomplish the organization's mission.
Right. I love it. What other key points? Is there any one more zinger you want to give us?
Yeah, I would say that the reason I like doing this and the reason I like talking about this is that one of the things I've learned is that many times small organizations have not had the ability to get the type of training that I've been fortunate to get through General Motors in many, many ways, whether it's executive development programs where you go off for 6 months, or being sent to various places to be very intensive training, or they don't know enough to know. Because, for example, I have a couple of clients that are family-owned companies, and I really find them the most interesting and also the most challenging, because they have a belief many times that, why do I need to change my style of leadership? Why do I need to change how I work with my people? Because I've been really successful the way I've been doing it. So why do I need to change now? And what they're not realizing is they may believe they're successful, but do their people really believe that work for them? Or are you really as successful as you could be? Are you really maximizing the potential of the organization? So I will bring some of those types of examples into the discussion also, because I think they'll resonate with the types of people that we typically have in our audiences, because they run the gamut of being small companies of anywhere from 10 to 15 people to large corporations that are on the New York Stock Exchange or on some of the foreign exchanges. So those will be some of the other types of things that I plan to bring into the discussion while we're all together there. And then the part that I certainly love the most is using that as the basis then for opening it up for questions, to talk about letting the people ask the questions about what their personal experiences are, which usually comes into play, or the typical, I've got this situation, how do I handle it type of thing.
Right. Well, that's so ideal. And I think the way that you just pointed out, that there's a lot of risks out there, and you may think you're a great leader. You may have had experiences and confidence in what you've achieved so far, but there's lots of things that could go on around you. And just look outside, right? The world today, the technology that's coming, the level of competition coming from anywhere with some new thing that doesn't exist today, but it will exist tomorrow. And you've got to be right there, agile on the spot, making change ready, and that's got to be led. So it sounds like not just your principles, but the whole day is going to really hit the spot for everybody.
Right. And that's very true. And I think part of the idea, too, of being a good learning leader is knowing that if you know these things are happening around you and you may not have the bandwidth to handle it yourself, part of being that learning leader also is the knowing to get the right people to work with you to help address those challenges and those opportunities so that you can still be effective.
Right, right. Yeah, and exactly what you're saying is, I'm sure you do this in your business. I'm going through the same thing in mine. How do I become a more effective leader for the team, for what we have for challenges out there in the world, what's coming, and we've got to be ready.
Correct. And I think I was reading somewhere recently that the average life expectancy of an executive or leader in their competencies in today's world is about a year. And the fact that in a year's time, enough changes that if you don't keep up, then you start falling behind.
Isn't that scary?
It is. It's very scary.
Yeah.
And that's probably always been the case, but the life cycles have gotten shorter.
Shorter indeed, yeah. Change is happening super fast. And
Correct.
One of those leadership dimensions, anyway, is paying attention to what's coming, being ready for it, and then managing the change through.
I think you summarized it really well, Pete.
Very good. Well, Joe, thank you for being here today. And everyone listening, we do hope to see you. And if you can't make it live, then at least learn what you can from either watching this video or listening to this podcast as part of Business Results Radio. And we're excited to have you. Joe, thank you so much. We'll see you in person in just a month or so.
Very much so. Thank you for the opportunity, and I'm looking forward to this year's conference and to meeting a lot of new people there. Thanks again.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Hey, Pete here again. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed that video, and I invite you to come back. Come back to this video channel or go to the podcast channel for Business Results Radio. Check it out, subscribe, give a 5-star review, and go ahead and share it with your friends. Until then, we'll see you again.